that shows you that it should start now. So again, thanks everyone for joining today. And for those of you who are joining for the first time, let me just introduce you. What is the Innovation Project? That is something that we from the Innovation Department do on a monthly basis in order for you to inspire you, to give you challenging ideas, to give you new thoughts, new technologies in order to start a conversation about these topics. And therefore to have a broader discussion about these things and maybe implement it within our work. That's the basic idea of the innovation break. And so as we just mentioned, Joe will start speaking in a minute, and then he has 30 minutes for his presentation, and afterwards we do the Q&A. So Suzanne also already shared a link within this team chat for Slido where you can put in your Q&A. So whenever you have any questions, just put it in there and we will tackle it in the end of it. And without further ado, I'm really thrilled to introduce Joe Justice here. I've personally following him for nearly 2 years now, so I know his work and I really honor his work and all the knowledge that he provides to so many communities. Therefore, I'll give over the stage to you, Joe, and yeah, let's have a good time.
You are so kind, Johannes. You're so kind. Thank you. It's my honor and privilege. I'm joining you all from Japan, from my office here in Japan. And I have a set of topics prepared that I'll try to make interesting and exciting and understandable. Hi, I'm Joe Justice. I worked directly with Bill Gates before. I was a developer at Microsoft and then a Scrum Master at the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. And in summary, Bill started every single meeting that I was in with Bill with how much of this can we do in parallel at the same time? And that really made a profound impact on me every single meeting. So I rethought Microsoft Office. How come it's structured like separate companies? They're all Microsoft, but inside they're run like separate companies. They have their own budgets. They have their own company functions. They don't wait on each other. Excel can be updated and released no matter if Microsoft Word is at a next version yet or not. PowerPoint can be released whether the others are available or not. Bill does this very intentionally, and then Ballmer and so on. Bill structured that originally, and that's worked so well. That structure has continued, that part of the structure. The idea is you have these chunks of a company that are run like their own company, and then they add up together to make a larger product. And what happened was, this was in 2010, that I was 2008, 2009, 2010, that I was working in the companies. I created a car company as a hobby. After work nights and weekends, I was trying to make a very efficient car and a company to manufacture them. And I tried to build it like Bill was structuring all the initiatives, like Bill and all the teams at Microsoft structured Microsoft Office. And then at the Gates Foundation, how the attempts to reduce and eventually eradicate polio were conducted. They were in these parallel executing groups that didn't have to wait on each other, that were not sequentially structured. They parallel executed. And what I built as a car, and I'll try to share a picture of it. I'll zoom in on something colorful. What I built as a car was this set of parallel executing modules that could be designed and built at the same time. And my goal was to try to experiment as fast as I could to make the most efficient car in the world. And this was 2008, 2009, 2010, early days for modern electric cars. So I was still using gasoline. I was just trying to use very, very little. And it worked. This system worked. I joined a competition called the Progressive Insurance Automotive X Prize and set 4 world records. I published everything that I used to build the car in open source. It became a Wikipedia article. I called the company WikiSpeed after Wikipedia, which I used to share the information on how the car was designed and built. And that attracted thousands of people from all over the world that updated the part designs and physically made pieces and mailed them to me. Ultimately, it became a company operating in 24 countries, Wikispeed, making a series of cars and rapid innovations on them. Well, that structure, that parallel executing structure, is what got me a job. I was doing this after work for on nights and weekends for fun, and I was a software developer and then a Scrum Master. This parallel executing structure and hardware got me a client. John Deere sent a group of managers to my garage, and they helped build parts of a car with me after work, after I'd been working at the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. And they said, we need this at John Deere for agricultural machinery. And they asked me to start a consultancy to help introduce the Wikispeed model and modularity into John Deere. And that got me clients in the military, making rockets, and then in the US Air Force. I eventually worked with every major automotive company in the world. I did consult to Amazon for a while and learned a tremendous amount from Jeff Bezos about team size. Jeff Bezos found that if the teams working on these modules were 5 people or less, Jeff Bezos didn't need to pay a manager. And Jeff Bezos and the Amazon mentality is try to be breakthrough with your innovation, but try to do it really affordably. So having teams of a maximum of 5 people, if you could, that could do something meaningful, design, build, and test something meaningful, meant they didn't need a manager. They were just all engineers, 3, 4, 5 engineers working together. And I learned that with Jeff Bezos. And then I went to work for Tesla as an employee, and I set up the Agile program at Tesla. And when I was in Tesla, the level of AI assistance was higher than I've seen anywhere else. Tesla software developers make their own AI stack, and they train them to answer specific questions. And some of what they've trained them to do is answer management questions, starting with really simple ones, like, should I take vacation time now? Oh, sorry, my Miro board's a little lagging. Not sure why. It was sharp and responsive just a moment ago. But I have this section on digital self-management, which is what I learned working for Elon Musk. The idea was take the questions that we wait for an answer. We might wait 10 minutes, we might wait 10 hours, we might wait 10 days, and try to train a software stack that can provide that answer instantly. And the quality of the answer needs to be just as good as the humans. It doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to be not worse than the humans and has to be faster. And as those AI stacks added up, hundreds of them, essentially management became replaced. And what occurred in Tesla, and then when I visited SpaceX, I saw the same thing, was teams of mostly 5 people or less, which was similar to what Amazon was doing, working on parallel executing modules. They didn't wait on each other, which is what I saw from Bill Gates, and using AI tools so they didn't have coordination meetings anymore. And they didn't wait for budget approval. They would ask AIs, is it responsible to spend money here? And they would use the AI's answer, and the AIs would answer instantly. They had so much cloud compute and local compute that the processing was instant. And the result is I never, ever saw a work environment faster than in the Musk company that I visited, Tesla, where I was an employee, or SpaceX, where I visited. Essentially, management has been replaced in the Musk companies. And so what does that mean if you're a leader? What does that mean if you're a manager? They didn't have any name for it. I retired from Tesla after the stock price went way up, but now I work for fun, and I have a humanitarian mission to try to make a really fun, loving company that can employ as many people as want to work there, like a meaningful, loving place to work. And the technology I'm using to try to make my own company now competitive is Mob AI, which is me trying to put a name on just the way we all worked in Tesla. You have these groups of attempted to be 5 people or less working on a parallel executable piece, not a phase, not a sequence, but do your own design, build, and test of a whole thing. And you have several people asking AIs questions and ideally training your own AIs while one person is doing the work. They're called the driver. And then we rotate who plays the driver. Everyone has to play driver. And you wait until the current driver has experienced success before you change driver. So confidence keeps building. And with AI tools and a group cheering for you, often you can do something useful in less than 7 minutes. So often we rotate the drivers about every 7 minutes, sometimes as fast as every 3 minutes. And the result is companies like SpaceX. SpaceX made 1,000 changes in hardware to the largest rocket in history, the Starship, in 69 days. For a lot of companies, a hardware change that you're going to use, that you're going to fly, takes years. One significant hardware change, you have a next major revision. It might be 5 years in the future, 7 years in the future. Because you have all these parallel executing teams, avionics modules, grid fin modules, thruster modules, different types of thruster modules, fuel pump modules, and teams are innovating just their piece, just their module as fast as they can. Those pieces update often more than once a day in production. So you have constant requests for approval from the world's governments for small pieces. And because the pieces are small, the requests for approval tend to happen very quickly. And no aerospace company, except SpaceX, releases new hardware this fast. And it's the same at Tesla. The head of software, senior director of application software at SpaceX, Ted Malaska, posted publicly, "We're looking for outstanding engineers to work in a game-changing environment, no project managers, no agile, not any agile the way I knew it, like no big room planning, no release trains, no sprint planning, none of that. No architects, no designers. We are in the office every day. SpaceX has no remote work, neither does Tesla. But you get to change the world and work on rockets. And they're hiring in California, Texas, Florida only. So Basler, you're safe. You're not going to have an exodus of employees from Basler." So what happens if you're a project manager or an architect or a designer? You join a group of 3, 4, or 5 people doing engineering, actually working on one of these modules. And you do use architecture skills and design skills, but you also will physically work. You'll learn something about welding. You'll learn something about procurement. You'll be emailing different suppliers constantly, and you'll also be physically making things yourself. Well, how would you do that? If you're a deeply experienced architect and you've never welded, how would you do that? Well, you have this team of 3 or 4 or 5 people total, and at least one of them has some experience in welding and can cheer for you and give you tips. And the other people are asking AIs, what's the most efficient way to introduce someone to this type of welding? For example, friction stir welding. And then they're saying that to you, and you rotate who's playing the role. And within 45 minutes, everyone has some experience. And after doing that for 8 hours, everyone has meaningful basic levels. And your architecture skill has also been shared when you're dealing with making architectural decisions, which everyone will make. Now, whatever you think about Elon Musk or Mark Zuckerberg or Bill Gates or Jeff Bezos, it's hilarious to watch them point at each other. And one of those is Mark Zuckerberg of Facebook credits Elon Musk with kicking off the tech trend of firing middle managers when other CEOs were a little shy. I don't think that's actually quite how it is. Most of these quotations are taken out of context and warped. It's really hard to get an idea of what any human is by looking at media. But there's something useful here. There aren't middle managers. I didn't experience any middle managers in Tesla or when I visited SpaceX because they weren't needed when the teams are working with what I'm calling mob AI. Here's what it looks like. At Tesla, all work was what I'll call mob AI. Mob AI works well with any composition of skill. All new people are highly creative. We would do group work. We would mob on emails to suppliers, for example, contracts, programming, software development, 3D modeling, even physical work like assembling robots or building cars. all work was mob AI. There is a related type of work called ensemble work. We also did that. Here's what it looks like. This is in Germany. This is in Brandenburg, Giga Berlin. This is a group about to start physical work. If your product is physical like a car, you can't do that remote. So this is why the Musk companies are in the office, no remote work. Because even if you're writing software at Tesla, you're expected to help with whatever's the bottleneck. So even though I was running the Agile program at Tesla, I helped build cars or unload trucks or get robots unstuck every day. And I can't do that remote. So when your product is physical, you need to be in the office. If your product is purely remote, like software, I actually recommend remote mob AI, which is what I teach now as my hobby job. Now you have each team owns their own piece, right? And they're not dependent. It's not sequential. They're working at the same time and they work towards an interface, a place where these pieces connect. This picture is from Neuralink, making medical electronics that are embedded in the human body, actually in the human brain. The mobs, if they share an interface, if their parts connect directly, they choose to work within 3 meters of each other. For this reason, they don't need any coordination meetings. They can hear directly when changes are coming that might impact their work. And these teams focus on finishing something and asking for government approval multiple times a day. All these small changes, small adjustments. So there's this constant rate of change. It's not like we're going to introduce a wave of change 3 years in the future. Every day, small changes are made and add up. It's very agile. These mobs started when I was in Tesla. It might be different now. I was an employee in 2020, so it's 3 years ago now. These mobs started with over 100,000 people every day at 5 a.m. and then again at 5 p.m. And at random points in between when needed, but formally at 5 a.m. and 5 p.m. every day, 7 days a week. And then they would self-organize around these modules, these parallel executing projects, or propose a new one if needed, of about 50 people. There wasn't a law about it. That's just what I observed happen. They ended up being about 50 people on each of these chunks, these projects, these missions, the initiatives. And then those groups of about 50 people were responsible for figuring out submodules, useful contributions that didn't wait on each other, that fit a group of about 3 to 5 people. They didn't do any big room planning. There were no release trains. There were no potentially shippable increments. Instead, it was simply update your module.
Ich sag mal, der Chakra-Typ war unterhaltsamer.
I do recommend conducting retrospectives, and that can also be done in a mob. So what kind of piece would your mob own? Well, that's where these modules come in, right? Like I pioneered with Wikispeed, which is a lot of what got me the job at Tesla. The Tesla Semi, for example, is this huge product. It's actually physically massive. It's this huge truck, right? Well, how do you make multiple changes in hardware in production in a day to a product that's so complex? Break it up into modules. I'll introduce this with some text. There are many ways to split a mission, a product, a service. Few of those ways create modules that can be built in any order or at the same time. So this is the goal of modular architecture, which I developed with Wikispeed and then was able to bring to some other companies. And here's what it looks like at Tesla, which does this in a very matured way. They have hundreds of thousands of people thinking very intelligently, I think, about this. One is the screens in the Tesla Semi. This is owned by a mob. They have their own budget. They have their own software development. They have their own mechanical engineering. They have their own procurement. So they're not waiting on central procurement or central budgeting. They run like their own company, so they don't have to wait on other companies, other groups. They own making these screens. And it's their job to try in production to reduce the grams, the weight in grams of this display by a gram or more every day, and to reduce the time in seconds it takes to manufacture these displays by a second or more every day, to reduce the cost to manufacture these displays by a penny or more every day. And because there's a known interface, they can create updates to these multiple times a day, and the rest of the Tesla Semi doesn't have to change. And it works. Here is the actual cost of that display, which is the same display in the Model 3 and Model Y. You can see it's not every 5 years there's a new version of the display in production. Every day, cost goes down by a penny or more. Every day, the weight of the display goes down by a gram or more. Every day, the power draw of that system goes down by a milliwatt or more. This is real agility, what we'd really want. That means cost savings are recognized immediately. Because every module team is trying to do this over a 4-year horizon without a major model change. The cost of the same car, in this case the Model 3, went down 30%, Tesla's cost. And the end user cost went down as well. Other modules. As complex as this center screen is, that's about as complex as a laptop. It has the compute, the cooling systems, and these screens. It's very similar to a laptop. That screen can change anytime, and the batteries don't have to change. The batteries team is completely separate and doesn't have to wait on the center screen, and the center screen doesn't have to wait on the battery. These are parallel executing systems like Bill Gates loves. Same with the rear axle, the rear drivetrain. That can change, and the battery doesn't have to change. They have an interface, a handshake, and any battery has to meet that interface. And if it does, it will be able to connect, it will be able to power the rear drivetrain and the center display, the center screen. The front axle is very, very similar, but has some additional electronics. That can change independently from the rear axle at any time. The cooling system can change at any time. The trick that makes these complex initiatives able to be mob-sized, mob AI-sized, is how they're split, the architecture, the agile architecture. And it's not just the physical products that are split this way. All the software is split like this, all the business goals, they're all designed to have people be able to make a meaningful contribution in production more than once a day. And the way production is able to cope with constant change is because production uses these mob AI tools. In summary of modularity, the products end up being like this. You have a product that's made of modules, and each module has inputs and outputs. And the inputs and outputs do change, actually multiple times a day. But if a team changes an input and output, they need to provide an adapter to the previous version so they can introduce their change without delaying any other team. So if we're making the door module and the rear view mirror module changes and the interface changes, the inputs and outputs change to the door, the rear view mirror will have an adapter to the previous version. And they won't even tell us. We'll just get a new rear view mirror, all the electronics and software in it too. And we'll see an adapter. So we'll know the interface changed. That'll be our signal as the door mob, the mob AI team developing lighter, cheaper, safer, easier to maintain doors. That'll be our signal to update the updated interface as soon as we can. Now, Johannes challenged me in just a few minutes to talk about how transformation would happen. Now, here we're looking at an agile native company. You know, Tesla is a Silicon Valley company right out of a rich software culture, a very agile culture. SpaceX is even more modern, hyper modern than that. What about transformation? How do established companies that have legacy they like, and some they don't like, but legacy they like, how do they move towards hyperspeed, 1,000 hardware changes in 69 days, approved by government agencies for public use and used publicly? How do you do that? Here's what my current theory of this is. First, you decide, do you want to try any of these really fast moving principles at all? Do you want to try mob AI, group work with groups of less than 5 people, start developing your own AI, or begin by asking ChatGPT and Google Bard and Bing? If you want to try that anywhere, pick the pilot project attempt to have it be a pilot that doesn't have to wait on other areas, try to have it be as independent as possible so it can speed up. And identify what executive support that pilot team might need. And a lot of the executive support that team might need is going to be discovered as it's running. So establish some system to listen. And the faster that team gets, the faster they're going to figure out what support they need. So find a way to listen, I hope, multiple times a day. And really listen and respond in a meaningful way, like be able to change the budget multiple times a day. There's a module that I'd love to share on agile budgeting and agile contracts. We just only have a little bit of time together. Then make the transformation visible with a set of KPIs. There's a system that I advocate called a justice board, which would track that pilot's acceleration, the speed of innovation climbing up. And that would allow you to use all 12 practices, as I understand them now, of how SpaceX operated when I visited and how Tesla operated when I was an employee there. I'll switch to Q&A after an invitation. My apologies, my laggy mural board. I'm not sure why it's so slow right now. But I'll attempt to zoom in. I'll actually be letting people or inviting people to do Mob AI with me. We'll have a practice project, a non-technical one. You don't have to have any engineering skill. We'll make a text together, but using real Mob AI tools. I do that online periodically. There's a link here if you wanted to screen capture or take a picture. I'll be doing it live in Prague in October, so you could do it with me directly if you wanted to. Then again in Stockholm in October, then in Munich, in München in October, then November in Bern, if you wanted to. And even if you don't have interest in that, I'd love it if you would connect with me so I can cheer for your work on X, formerly Twitter, or Facebook, LinkedIn, written some books. I do online classes, and my YouTube channel is likely the most useful. I think that's how Johannes, for example, found me and said I might be useful to be here. My current goal is to make a company to run a company that uses these practices, all Mob AI, for example, that can employ as many people as want to join of any age. My goal is to make a company that could employ 9 billion people, as the population of the earth grows. I'm deeply passionate about making remote employment so people can work from wherever they want, doing something meaningful. And the current projects are all around digital self-management components for governments to allow governments to operate in a more transparent, more financially responsible, hopefully less corrupt way, and safety initiatives. That company is in its absolute infancy, but you can see all the developments of it on my social or at abi-agile.com. If there are any comments or questions, I'd like to try to engage in them now. Johannes, thank you so much for inviting me. Everyone, thank you very much.
Oh, thanks as well to you, and really good insights again. And as we do switch now, as you can see, a lot of people are clapping. Appreciate that as well. I just stop the recording now, then we can switch over to, let me just